Boccaccio's Decameron. Here's the book. First day, fifth story. Now, yesterday, well, not yesterday, it would be the same day, earlier that day, in fact, just at the point where we're going to start reading, Dioneo was telling a story of a young monk and his abbot and a young lady they shared in his cell, but not at the same time. And it was the first of the raunchy stories that Dioneo will tell. And that's where we take up with the introduction to the fifth story. So, as they listened to Dioneo's story, the ladies at first felt some embarrassment, which showed itself in the modest blushes that appeared on all their faces. Then, glancing at one another and barely managing to restrain their laughter, they giggled as they listened. When it came to an end, however, they gently rebuked him with a few well-chosen words in order to show that stories of that kind should not be told when ladies were present. Then the queen turned to Fiammetta, who was sitting on the grass next to him, and indicated that it was her turn to continue, whereupon, with a cheerful smile toward the queen, she gracefully began. Whereas men, if they are wise, will always seek to love ladies of higher station than their own, women, if they are very discerning, will know how to guard against accepting the advances of a man who is of more exalted rank. For this reason, and also because of the pleasure I feel at our having, through our stories, begun to demonstrate the power of good repartee, I have been prompted to show you, fair ladies, in the story that I have to tell, how through her words and action, a gentlewoman avoided this pitfall and guided her suitor clear of its dangers. That is one hell of a long run-on sentence. Shall I begin the story? The Marquis of Montferrat was a man of outstanding worth, who had sailed as Gonfalonier of the church with a Christian host on a crusade to the Holy Land. This would be the third crusade to retake Jerusalem after they lost it to Saladin. And one day, during a conversation about his merits at the court of King Philip Le Borgne, or is it Le Borgne? I have really a lot of trouble with French names. It's Philip II of France, I believe, the one with one eye, who was reputed to maybe have had a relationship with Richard the Lionhearted of England on their way to France to free the Holy Land. That's the king. Anyway, it was he who was also preparing to leave for France to join the crusade. A courtier observed that there was not a wedded couple under the sun to compare with the Marquis and his lady. For just as the Marquis was a paragon of all the knightly virtues, so the lady was more beautiful and worthy of esteem than any other woman in the world. This woman did exist, but at this time she actually was about 70, at the time that King Philip is leaving for the Crusades. And we know the exact route that King Philip took, which doesn't take him anywhere near Montferrat. But, Boccaccio is using a historical context to set a fictional story. But let me proceed, shall I? These words left such a deep impression on the French king's mind that without having ever seen the lady, he at once became fervently enamored of her and decided that under no circumstances would he embark for the crusade at any other port than Genoa, so that by traveling overland he would have a plausible pretext for paying the Marchioness a visit. In this way he thought he would succeed, since the Marquis would be absent in bringing his desire to fruition. He lost no time in putting his deep-laid scheme into effect. Having sent all his men on ahead, he set out with a small retinue of nobles, and as they approached the territory of the Marquis, he sent word to the lady a day in advance that she was to expect him for breakfast on the following morning. Being an intelligent and judicious woman, she sent back a message to say that she was glad to have been singled out for this uniquely great favor, and that the king would be very welcome. She then began to wonder why such a great king should be calling upon her in her husband's absence. Nor was she wrong in the conclusion that she reached, namely that he was being drawn thither by the fame of her beauty. Nevertheless, with her habitual nobility of spirit, she made ready to entertain him, and after summoning all the few remaining gentlemen of rank, acting upon their advice, she issued instructions for the necessary preparations to be made, at the same time insisting that she alone would arrange the banquet and devise its menu. Without a moment's delay, she collected together all the hens that could be found in the neighborhood, and ordered her cooks to prepare a series of dishes using these alone for the royal banquet. The king arrived on the day he had appointed and was warmly and honorably received by the lady. On meeting her for the first time, he was greatly amazed to find that she was even more beautiful, intelligent, and gentle-mannered than he had been led to expect from the words of the courtier. And he was lavish with his compliments, for he had become all the more inflamed with passion on finding that the lady exceeded her expectations. After he had rested for a while in rooms that had been richly appointed with all the furnishing appropriate to the reception of so great a king, it was time for the banquet, and the king sat with the Marchioness at one table, whilst the remaining guests were entertained at the other tables, according to their rank and quality. The king being served with many dishes, one after another, and with choice and precious wines, and gazing contentedly from time to time at the beautiful Marchioness, was filled with an intense pleasure. But as one dish followed the next, he began to feel somewhat perplexed, for he could not help noticing that although the courses were different, each and every one of them consisted solely of chicken. He was well enough acquainted with that particular region to know that it should be well stocked with a variety of game. And by sending the lady advance notice of his arrival, he had given her ample time to organize a hunt. But although he was greatly surprised by all this, he had no desire to give any cause for embarrassment except for putting in a word about her chickens. So smiling broadly, he turned towards her and said, "Madame, is it only hens that flourish in these parts, and not a single cock?" The Marchioness, who understood his question perfectly, saw this as exactly the kind of heaven-sent opportunity she had hoped for in order to make clear her intentions. On hearing the king's inquiry, she turned boldly towards him and replied, "No, my lord, but our women, whilst they may differ slightly from each other in their rank and style of their dress, are made no differently here than they are elsewhere." Basically, you've got women at home. Women here are no different. Stick with your wife. On hearing this, the king saw clearly the reason for the banquet of chickens, and the virtue that lay concealed beneath her little homily. He realized that honeyed words would be wasted on a lady of this sort, and that force was out of the question. And thus, in the same way that he had foolishly become inflamed, so now he wisely decided that he was honor bound to extinguish the ill-conceived fires of his passion. Fearing her replies, he teased her no further, but applied himself to his meal, by now convinced that all hope was lost. And as soon as he had finished eating, in order to compensate for his dishonorable coming by his swift departure, he thanked her for her generous hospitality and departed for Genoa, with the lady wishing him Godspeed. Well, I hope you've enjoyed that. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.